well, for the first time, oh, you tell me when to start. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We are live streaming. We're trying this. We are live streaming it to the LASA directors. We're live streaming to the LASA directors group of the association, so hopefully many members will be joining in or listening to this. Today was a fantastic day. We started in the morning with a baby shower for Thais, who's going to have a baby, I think, in November. So it was a great way to start the day. And I also want to let you know that Carlos Andrés Vera, the filmmaker, is going to be giving a talk in Spanish Tuesday on what is happening in Ecuador here. And I think that Krista already sent the invitation for that, or she will send it on Monday. The next colloquium will be on October 11, and Professor Carmen Martinez Novo will talk on paternalism and ventriloquism as forms of white privilege and colonial legacies in Latin America. And today we are so honored to have with us Eduardo Abaroa. He's a Mexican artist and writer working on the fields of sculpture, installation, and live action. He has exhibited his work in major museums in Mexico, La MoCA, PS1, ICA Boston, CIFO in the United States, Reina Sofía in Spain, Kunstwerke, and I totally killed the name in Germany, and other important venues in the United States, Canada, France, South Korea, Colombia. In the early 1990s, he co-founded the T44 Artist-Run Space. His contributions were essential in the foundation of Soma, an artist-run school in Mexico City, which opened in 2008. He directed the Night International Symposium of Art Theory in Mexico City, and he's teaching a class here with us, and the end project of the class is going to be an installation with his students. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Carlos. Well, thank you very much. I do have to thank the Kislak Family Foundation and the faculty at the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of Florida for this quite unexpected honor. And it's a fantastic place, and thank you for allowing me to collaborate with such a great group of professors and students. I do have to thank the center's director, Dr. Carlos de la Torre, as well as Jesus Fuenmayor, the University Gallery Director, for their hospitality, guidance, and support, as well as Carmen Martinez, Luis Felipe Solis, Ariadna Tenorio, Sean Carney, and the rest of the art faculty. I also have to mention the great work of the team at the Center for Latin American Studies, especially Jessica Caicedo and Maria Gamborgi, for their kindness and patience. Obviously, I thank the students who enrolled to the course. We're having fun, I hope. It keeps going like that. And then finally, I'd like to thank my family, Sofia and Dario. They see this eventually, as well as my mom for so much I can't begin to say. So thanks a lot. And I'll show you some projects. I've been working for almost 30 years, so it's not at all the whole of the things I've done. I selected some very particular things I hope you will enjoy. I usually start my presentations with this work, which is while I was a student, and this is a work that's called. This is looking my way to see the title. I guess that's enough. It says several kilometers of fake gold chain. The project consists of surrounding the actual territory of the Republic of Mexico with fake gold chain. My early estimate was that it would take more than $6 million to complete the official 15,570 kilometers distance, making the piece almost impossible to produce. Moreover, the measure would vary depending on the definition you want to obtain. From that point of view, the quantity of fake gold chain is potentially infinite. That because every map is potentially infinite. It depends on how much you're going to surround. You can just like include a little rock or include a little, pebble or, golf over there. So this work initiated a little bit of what I would say are pieces that are somehow impossible to do. And this is actually something that we will make in this course here at UF, to ask all the students to devise or try to devise something that is an impossible project, because I think it's a good exercise. But this one, for me, was somehow pertinent because at that time, we were discussing in Mexico the North American Free Trade Agreement. And as you probably remember, the North American Free Trade Agreement had this very important mining thing. A lot of the mining problems we have right now go back to the 90s and precisely this treaty. And it felt on the air as a young guy, I just thought how important it was, all the propaganda that we got that Mexico was such a good country and such a great thing, and they're making the country a silver lining, not a golden lining even. So in a sense, it's, for me, it's a little bit of a criticism to that aspect of Mexican politics at the time, and it was just like a very small drawing, but eventually people started to include it in the shows that they wanted to show my work in, so it eventually became perhaps the very, very first work that I include in the catalog most of the time. So this one is also a very early piece. This one is called Aspirin Pyramid, and it is it follows the idea that each aspirin can cure a headache. So this would include 700 and 500 headaches. So that's the issue with this with the sculpture, and it's taken from obviously this sort of, it could be taken from a pyramid, all these ancient monuments, and also some meditation schemes from the Hindu culture. In any event, I liked the impossibility of it. It has obviously a little bit of a trick. It's hanging from the ceiling. This one is also very early. It's made with cupcakes, which in Mexico we call them penguins. I think we call them cupcakes here. And but this one is making this sort of like a satanic sign, because it's a pentagram. So it's a satanic chromosome. And well, this was actually very interesting because the maker of the product actually wanted the piece, but they were very religious, so we had to make a version for them. But the whole idea, that's not so terrible. But this one, I was playing with this idea of sugar and all this. Eventually this is not really food, and I still ate those like crazy. And right now it has a resonance because there's a link between diabetes and art in Mexico, because some of the collections produce sugar drinks. So actually, at least two of the biggest ones produce sugary drinks. So in a sense, I like to, each object is a very, especially these small scale objects are small, let's say, moments in which I try to think the relationship between processes like eating or like buying something, and the whole of the production process in a given context. This one, for example, is much later, but I really liked. I had this opportunity to do this project in the Broadway windows, which is a very nice project on Broadway, of course. And you were supposed to make these windows, but there was very little money. It was like, I don't know, I don't want to say, but I couldn't go. And I said, I'm going to use something, just use newspaper. And we made this piece in which we painted the whole, usually people put objects inside the window. How do they display? I forgot the name. But, and this, I just made this, sent them the instructions to use this newspaper and to paint the whole thing inside with one color. And the actual this was at the time where I had the just reading your text that have all words, you know. So this is a kind of words. It's kind of like a I guess homage to Jenny Hosser, that is one of the artists who inspired me to become actually an artist when I was really young. This other piece relates to that thing that most of us did. I don't know if we do it so much anymore, but you have the control. You have and these are the actual silicone pieces. If you open your remote control, it's the piece that you get inside. So this comes from the idea that you basically do not move, but are moving at the same time. You're completely immobile, and the remote control allows you to not move, but at the same time go to the farther away you can go, the space, you can go to the next galaxy. You can transport yourself without moving. And for me, that was very interesting. But at the same time, this has matter. This is something solid. So all of these are taken from the trash. There are a lot of them. So you have to go and ask someone to help you out to get all these materials, and you have to go fish them out in places that there's terrible amounts of the stuff we use. So it is to become conscious of the material aspect of our digital life, which so many of us think it doesn't have a materiality. We believe that what we see on a computer basically has almost a spiritual, no? But no, it has a very demanding, resource demanding materiality. So when I would love to do stuff with all these resins, and some of my colleagues use all these materials which are so pollutant, and it's very difficult as a sculptor not to get crazy with materials, because there are, for example, where I studied in LA, you have the best sculptors in the world, because they are used to have, at that time in the 2000s, they had Hollywood, and Hollywood was about makeup and models, and all these sculptural things. But these are silicones, fiberglass, all these materials that I wish I could use more. But eventually, for what, they are very expensive. But now this is starting to disappear because of the technology, and all the movies are basically computer generated. So people do not make these fantastic models that they made in all these movies. So I'm very interested in how the materials behave in all my work. Here is a exhibition that we made with that kind of sculptures with remote controls. And what you see are these pieces of cloth that it is basically a pirate city in Mexico. We have a lot of pirate. We call it pirate, but basically nobody can buy like a real, brand new CD. So you always have to buy. Well, not you. I don't. No, I did buy some. That's why I figured it out. But anyway, everybody buys, counterfeit, or how would you call it, material that you don't pay the rights to pay. And this one is, all of these things are sold on the street, and you get to get this material. And I'm going to translate to you what this is like a company already. It's like a company that obviously they have dealings with the police or something, not to get arrested or something. It's very shady over there. And the legend says, "Made in the city of swindles and small, a production made especially for you, who like me has no possibility to buy expensive products. Our goal is not to fight or harm your favorite arts. We want to give you a bit of joy at a low price with good quality, and thus earn a living." So it's quite funny, how it's. Then this doesn't show very well, but this is the Statue of Liberty thing, and it also says, over there it says forbidden. We forbid its reproduction, total or partial. So on top of that, it does have that disclaimer anyway. You shouldn't do it. But yeah, I worked a little bit with some of the songs that people actually hear in these CDs, and but at the same time, this is a thing that you can wear. You know, this is the people could wear them. So now I become a fashion designer, and I'm waiting for someone who knows how to spin. You know, there are these Persian and
Oh yeah.
excuse me, you know, Sufi dancers, and I'd like to contact one to see if they can just like spin. I tried to do it, but it's obviously not the effect I'm looking for yet. Well, I'm going to another scale now. This is Barnett Newman's Broken Obelisk, which is one of my favorite sculptures of all time. I really like his work, even if we know exactly like all the you know all the context is amazing, but also somehow fearsome. But still, you know, this classic use of these structures of antiquity is always thought is one of the best ideas for a sculpture that I've ever had, especially because that someone has ever had, because this also the reading could be also thought as some kind of colonial reading. No, I think that the obelisk itself, upside down, I don't know if he thought about it that way, but it is definitely an imperial marker, and you know, people transported obelisks in the times of the French Revolution, and people, you know, have this. It has this loaded symbolism. So this obviously is it's an homage, but also I made my own version. Now I counterfeit it. You know, I kind of like the other guys. I made my pirate version of the obelisk, and this is a piece I also made when I was very young. I was probably 25 or something, and it's also like this. I made it's pink because it's made with the materials that we use in Mexico. Well, for street markers, like. In Mexico, in the 60s, there was this issue that we have a terrible strife in 1968, and some people interpret that there were not enough jobs for people, so people started selling stuff on the street more than usual. So this is all informal markets, and if you fly above Mexico City, you will see all the different colors of these outdoor markets. And they sell all kinds of goods, including CDs, but also at the time they sell Chinese toys or, you know, all these knockoff brands of Nike tennis shoes or whatever, you know, all these brands that are completely fake. And people really make a living out of it, and it's a very interesting social phenomenon. So I decided to make a work of art that had to do, instead of this huge corporate building, which is what I was trained to do, because I was trained to do all this, you know, metal thing, like the Barnett Newman thing. I was trained to do that, to train that kind of urban sculpture. But I said that urban sculpture, you never asked anyone where to put. You know, it's like you just governments, just like, or the city authorities, just like put the sculpture. They never ask. In Mexico, at least, they never ask. And I'm like, well, I want to make something that has to do with our reality. But always in my work, I am very conscious that my analytic, or so to speak, qualities in my work are limited to the materials that I'm using. It's not exactly that I wanted to make a particular kind of ethnography or anything. But at the time, I didn't know, but I was making some kind of ethnographic object. Over there are some friends of mine who were the only public who weren't there. There are like 5 people. There are 2 children over there. They are waiting for something to happen because they saw the structure and they're like, oh, this is going to be a performance or a circus or a magician or something. And when we told them that it's going to be an artwork, they go like, left. But there's this meat seller who really enjoyed the piece. He even took his clothes off. It's something that, and we asked the people on the market if they like the work, and they say lacks fantasy. So, it's like it wasn't to the taste of the people of the market. But eventually we managed to show the work the whole day. They usually, someone will come and ask you, do you have permission to your exhibition? Because people have to pay. But if we're not selling anything, they don't, it doesn't. So this eventually, it's interesting because for a long time, it was a piece that I was invited to show a lot in the United States. And I like that idea that people see their culture reflected in some of the culture. So I made other versions of other pieces. This one is called Sanitary Stonehenge. And it is, as you might think, for some reason I made this association and we actually performed this one. This is not an impossible work. This is the Sanitary Stonehenge is we made with this very difficult, demanding piece because these things are heavy, really heavy, and the only site we could find is on the top of a Sheraton hotel for the parking space of a parking building of a Sheraton hotel. So this is how it looked. I was told that Stonehenge was some sort of calendaric artifice, so I made a solstice, nice, but in autumn because solstice is not in autumn, but we made the day last longer with a machine so that we could use like this sort of like event. Even you had to make some sort of artificial sun. That's a lamp. It's not a real sun. Yeah, because it wasn't the date that we needed. But I think I got it was a interesting thing to do because it became an opportunity to discuss about time and how cultures have measured time and lived time. And we tried to recreate some of the structures of Stonehenge, and then I made some drawings that had to do with all these topics. Sure. Yeah, this is Sheraton. And this is a sundial made with spray paint. So this is a clepsydra, I don't know, a water clock. So it was, we had the opportunity, I believe that we were very lucky because I had the opportunity to make this also in other places. I made it in Denmark for some reason. They enjoyed the piece. I'm waiting for the English to invite someone tell. Okay, so now we're here with one of the most complex projects that I've ever made. This one is called, this is a museum, the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, which was made in 1964 in Mexico City. For a long time, all the archaeological treasures of Mexico were, well, not all, but many of the most important archaeological treasures of Mexico were gathered in a museum. It's called the Museo Nacional. But in the 60s, the president, Adolfo López Mateos, decided that he would finally make a museum which would be make these pieces available for the whole people of Mexico. Because the other one was very small, it almost looks like a warehouse. So they made this huge museum for the pieces to be available. Nevertheless, a lot of it had to do with tourism also, but not so much as we might believe, I think. And another idea is that this capacity to show archaeology was basically learned via international fairs, world fairs. And they took, at that time, they would take the big pieces of archaeology and they would take them to Europe or to Asia or to some other places. But But that the same guy who made many of these pavilions eventually made the museum, who is Pedro Ramirez Vasquez. This is a museum. And the thing is that I propose to demolish the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, including its pre-Hispanic and ethnographic collections, the auditorium, the library, the gift shop, the warehouses, the school, etc. I hired an expert to help me visualize the processes needed for its controlled destruction using the available engineering procedures. So, well, this is Pedro Ramirez Vasquez here, is the architect of the whole thing. Over there we see the director, the Secretary of Education, and it is a moment where Mexico became sort of like the culmination of the education program of the revolution. Remember that we had a revolution in 1910. The culmination of that program, inaugurated by Jose Vasconcelos, was precisely the Museum of Anthropology. So my idea was to make an exhibition which would describe everything that the expert told me was a method to destroy. So it is an exhibition about an exhibition space, and it had the challenge to the exhibition space was very big, but it's not as huge as the museum. So how to convey this enormous activity? And I think we had a good chance to do it. So the first thing is a model that we made. It's also without permission. I asked for permission, but they didn't grant it. So we had to work outside of the thing. I mean, I don't blame them, because we went to the museum and the engineer in demolitions, he was telling me, we could put some charges there, and they kicked us out. And I did have, and I did have to sign on the notary that I would not demolish. So one of the things that I really had to do legally. So I hope nobody actually makes a terrorist thing with that. But the method that I was looking for was not a terrorist thing. It was rather the contrary. It was, how would someone do it if they just want to get rid of it? We don't need it anymore. And it is a very definite process, very expensive. So as opposed to, well, these colors here. This is the blueprint of the museum, and each color is a different process. So I'll guide you quickly through all the processes that you have to do. This yellow is recycling. One of the most important processes of any demolition process is recycling. For example, the glass. The glass you would take in somewhere else. If you leave it during the demolition, no matter which process of demolition you use, the glass may just like fly with some of these processes and kill someone, because of the destruction. It is difficult. It is always the first thing they do is get rid of the glass. So here in the show, we put this big sheet of glass, and it is interesting for me because those drawings that were originally in the museum are not there anymore. They made a remodeling of the museum, so these little drawings on the glass are gone, and I'm not sure they have the actual drawings anymore. So it's a funny thing that the piece is becoming a monument of how the museum used to be, which is strange if you're thinking that I'm trying to destroy it symbolically, but that's the way it is. This other part is it's part of the museum that's made of aluminum. It is lattice work made by modernist artist Manuel Felgueres. Many of the artists of the time made pro bono work for the museum, and some of them are pretty awesome. This one I like. It's supposed to be a snake. It's a little bit cultural appropriation of the, I guess, Mayan culture, which is something that was done completely unconsciously at the time, or deliberately. I might say it was a whole game was appropriate all of these cultures. And so what would we do with this one, for example? Which one we will melt? No. So there was an ingot of aluminum in the show, and it had this kind of lighting, so it looked like a very important thing. But it's basically the material that if you had molten the piece by Felgueres, aluminum was a very state-of-the-art material when they made the museum. It was very expensive, so because there was a lot of glass too. So glass and aluminum were part of the modernist, let's say, genetics of the museum. No, the Le Corbusier was there, the modernist was there, but at the same time it was mixed with a lot of pre-Hispanic references and even Asian references. This red and yellow, this red would be some kind of red and yellow are the color for hydraulic excavators and hydraulic hammers. So what we did is we tried to make sort of like a model of how what the debris would look like. But remember that you had to put the instructions for the work is to destroy also the archaeological pieces. So we remade some of these archaeological pieces, and we bought official replicas of the actual pieces that are in the museum. So we were very diligent in that there were no crazy stuff. No, we tried to be very accurate, you know. And this is my very bad Photoshop. I enjoy being very bad with Photoshop, but I'm getting better now, unfortunately. But anyway, this is what we would use. Is this a crane that we would use to destroy this, which is a very characteristic part of the museum. And these are the excavators, because we would not use explosives for this one. It would be done with excavators. It's very easy. You do not use explosives, and we would just you would have all these excavators destroying it little by little, bit by bit, and you would have just like filling the trucks with debris, and they would just like go out to. The most important problem of the demolition process is where to put the debris. That's what the guy told me. This is the most difficult thing. But this has with it another issue, which is, for example, in the outskirts of Mexico, you still have traditional peoples. And my friend Fernando Palma, who lives in Milpalta, he was telling me, a lot of people who are making demolitions, they just like go to the outskirts of Mexico and they drop the concrete. So for me, it was interesting, that the building is so important, but still, like with the remote controls, I like these material stories, the relationship to the actual processes that the city needs. Here is another look at how this is how it looked at the Amparo Museum. This dot here is the actual post that holds that structure, which is it is a very hard concrete. So you need something else to destroy it. You can see that column over there. What you see is bronze. The bronze would be melted too, but inside there's a concrete structure. So what we have to use for that is something called expansive cement, and you dig you have to make a hole on the concrete, and then you pour this material into the water, and it starts to expand. And as it expands, it can break the concrete, and then it's easier to destroy. So it's not just like the excavator with a hydraulic hammer, but you have to use this substance. So we put some examples of this material in the exhibition. Over there it says, the care we took for the construction of this work has given us the security of its absolute permanence in time. So this is the words of the architect. The museum was thought of as it would be eternal almost, in the mind of the architect, which is okay. but it would be destroyed in about 4 months. It is a time. It's not very difficult. It's a very well built building. It's one of the top moments of Mexican architecture. It won a prize in Venice and stuff. But it is actually a proof of its genius in terms of architecture is how delicate it is actually. It's contrary to what one might think. These are this is some pieces of wood that separate the school and the library from the museum from the public places that you use. And these we would burn. So in the show you have these sculpture that are these structures that are burned. Then this other thing is at the end. Now we can see that the museum is gone, but this is the entrance of the museum, and that is this piece we have here. This is a sculpture that we call Tlaloc, which would be a deity dedicated to rain, and it was put in there because the president himself decided that it would be a good idea to bring it to decorate the museum. The only problem is that the people who were living around this piece didn't want it taken. So the president had to send the architect, Pedro Ramirez Vasquez. They had to convince the people that it was very necessary. And check it out. This is a piece that was made. It was actually it's unfinished. Well, it won't be finished, but well, it's a piece that. It was so boring, the rest of the project. So the guy who specialized in explosives, he told me that you would never use explosives to destroy a building like this because it's too light. You put the explosives and it would just like sit, and you would have to destroy it with a mechanical, hydraulic excavators anyway. You do that for very big buildings that will crumble as they are destroyed, and then you just take the debris and you put it in the truck. But I was like, but he told me, but we sometimes use this process because politicians hire us to do it because they want to make a spectacle. And even if the building or the factory that they want to destroy does not need explosives, we use them anyway. Even if it's more expensive, much more dangerous, and it takes more expertise. So I decided that we would use explosives to destroy this piece because I wanted to allude to the fact that how the president can actually decide to take or to move or to appropriate in the name of the state any archaeological probe. This was done in the 60s by Lopez Mateos, the sponsor of this museum, but it had also happened with Peña Nieto, that at the time he was the governor of one of the largest states in Mexico, and he had made a copy of the actual Tlaloc sculpture and put it in its original piece, and he said, "We are, fulfilling a debt we had with the town of Coatlinchan because we were given the copy of the sculpture." So it's this idea of a president giving and taking and, the property. So for me, it was a criticism, this piece of Mexican presidentialism. Who decides what the past is, where it belongs, and it's still happening today, and I'm going. So I've been doing these visits to the museum for all this a little bit more than 10 years now, and we discuss these whole issues. And it's a really interesting way to interact with people in the museum. We've had artists basically, but I have even anthropologists, the curators for the museum also have joined me for some amounts of time. So it is very interesting, and I feel like it's. I think that was very unexpected that the project is still running. And in the last 6 months, I keep doing these things, and it's a lot of fun. I made a series of photographs just to try to understand the function of the museum. You see, in Mexico, it's not. It's supposed to be. How do you say this? The division between state and church is very strong. So you don't have a relationship of a temple and the president, or God and the president. But this museum in particular fulfills the function of a sacred building. So a lot of things happen there. Right now, it's a little bit different. But for example, here we see an event, which they are the richest families of Mexico, and they are making this huge event. No? So it's this really fantastic place for people to make symposia. There are weddings also. So it has this almost like a sacred motive. No? At the end, this is also something that I don't think that anyone, they removed it now. The sponsors are some other people, but this is that thing where the museum says thanks to the corporations that help. So you have Televisa, for example, is a telecommunications company, but they give some money to the museum or in some capacity, but at the same time, in Mexico, Televisa is always working against community radio, which is really important in the mountains for the peoples who live, indigenous communities in the mountains. They really need to have a community radio. And Televisa is always trying to block, for example. You have over there Cinemex. That's worse even because Cinemex is a movie theater company, but its parent company is Cemex, which is no, excuse me, it's Grupo México, who is always going against communities.
It's a mining company.
It's a mining company, and it's always, one of the worst, some of the worst problems between mining companies and indigenous peoples come from this very particular group. One of the richest men in Mexico is running it today. Then to make the projects, I remained like a ghost inside the museum to get interesting things that happen. So I made a collection of photographs, and this one for me was very interesting. For some reason, there are a lot of religious women who go to the museum, and they always take a picture with, at least at that 10 years ago, I don't know if still, but they took. But you see, this piece at the time had to be buried, because people actually adored it. Even in the beginning of in the last decades of the 19th century, people were still, adoring the piece, and they still do today. There are people who go there and make rituals in the museum today. But the Catholic Church was always thinking that these objects were the devil's works. So it is very ironic that Catholics even just like completely, forget about the demonic capacities of anything that could be called pre-Hispanic. And it's also interesting to me that the issue of femininity in this work, because this culture is Coatlicue, who is the mother of Huitzilopochtli, but it is a very monstrous female character, motherly character, terrible motherly. A fantastic, one of the nicest sculptures. But one of the things that happened with this collection of photos is I made it for a book, but I couldn't take the photographs of these sculptures without paying enormous amounts of money for the book. So the book, you don't see almost any real pieces, because that book will cost a lot of money. So our book is just, you don't see, but it's made in a way in which you think that you're buying an official catalog of a museum, but it's also. So I have this. This, for example, for me is quite interesting. This is a Zapatista model that they had, which is very nice. I really enjoyed it, but I took the photograph because the Zapatista movement, for those who do not remember or those who do not know, is one of the most important movements in the 90s. At least in Mexico, it's really, really important. Some people believe it's the first digital revolution. but it is something that in the museum, even if it is dedicated, because because the first floor of the museum is dedicated to ancient Mexico. So it's all about archaeology. But the second floor of the museum is supposed to be about the indigenous peoples of today, which until very recently it was the indigenous people of the 60s, no? Not because from the 60s to the 90s or to the 2000s, it was dramatically changed, completely dramatic. But anyway, they're dedicated to the indigenous peoples of today, but they didn't have but this little figure, which is very like even cute, and some parallels. So it was very ironic that they were not informing about something that is crucial, not for the viewer, but for the people who are represented in the museum. So perhaps you're getting a clue of why I'm making this project. Because even if the museum represents what Mexicans are proud of, it's all for us Mexicans. In our name, they do these kinds of things. This one is also gone now. There's so many things that are not there anyway, that are not there anymore. But the museum had these mannequins of people, which are very uncomfortable to see. I know that the earlier ethnography museums had real people. This didn't happen here. But at the same time, this feels very uncomfortable. And this one was very strange because it was as if the person was looking at their own heritage forever. This is not a person, this is a mannequin, and she's looking at those purépecha objects. So this is gone too. What didn't happen in the inside of the museum, people wrote on the outside, on the walls of the museum. So here we have Recuerda 1968, remember 1968, remember Ayotzinapa, which was this terrible thing that happened with 43 students who were disappeared in the hands of police. These were people protesting, and they are writing one time and again, every time they can, they remember this. That same day, I found this mannequin hidden behind the wall, and I couldn't resist to have this photo taken. It is one thing that these mannequins had, that they were supposedly made to depict the physiognomy of each group, which is very strange because in Mexico, they have been moving the people around. It's not like everybody has stood in one place forever, but eventually they also move around the mannequins. So, and now the mannequins are gone because they were very controversial. Nobody really felt comfortable with those. But for example, they have this really nice piece of amber, but they never tell you that the people in Symposium, Chiapas actually use children to get the amber, and it's a dangerous thing. So this is a kind of information that I think should be included in the museum. Even if you go with your family and stuff, at least all your things should say, hey, remember, these are the real processes behind these cases. This is another piece that I like. This is not from the project of the Anthropology Museum, but now I'm going to show you some of the other things that I have made, which sort of relate. This is a piece that I made with it's baked clay, and I did it depicting a mine in Guerrero, which is a gold mine. My issue here was to try to make something with the technology that was not a technology that was sort of not electronic, not a photograph, not to try to make something that people would use in that particular place. So this is this area is very problematic because we have the mining companies, but the mining companies also hire organized crime to protect. They have to pay that organized crime, and then the organized crime also harasses the miners. So it's a very difficult thing. Some of these criminals are in control of the actual mining area. It's something that perhaps the people who defend free trade and all this extractivism do not take into account sometimes. Here I'm going to show you a project that I made during the pandemic, which is called, actually it doesn't have a name, but it was a project analyzing what is now in Mexico called the Maya train, or the Tren Maya, which is a project that to have a train run all over the Yucatan Peninsula and surrounding the. And I made, I couldn't go to Yucatan. The plan was to go to Yucatan. We had this project and I wanted to go, but then, we had the pandemic. So from my house, I could actually, try to get all the videos that I could that pertain to this project. So I made a collection of postcards in video. So this one is called No al Progreso, which is No Progress. And I'm starting. I'm showing it.
Se ha dicho que el Tren Maya va a traer progreso y que el sureste mexicano está pauperizado, que no hay suficiente crecimiento. ¿Por qué se oponen ustedes al progreso?
Bueno, la realidad que nosotros estamos viviendo en Quintana Roo es verdaderamente alarmante, sobre todo con la imposición de ese modelo de desarrollo o ese modelo, esa idea de progreso que nos están imponiendo, ¿no?
So the whole thing is to extract video of the project from the internet and then put some audio of some person involved in the conflict. So this is an activist from one of the territories. And we can hear how he speaks about he doesn't want the project to happen. And we are still looking at these touristic images all the time. I included, for example, some of for this one, which is how people are, the politicians are promoting the project, how people are building the project. This is a movie about the discovery of the tomb of Pacal. Probably that's familiar with you. And all these touristic images that are very available. It's funny because if you go to this area, you end up taking the same pictures as everybody else. And somehow I kind of realized that I didn't have to go to get the images that I need. So it was interesting. Nevertheless, the project did not do well because I never found anyone who wanted to show. So it was very difficult. So here we have all the politicians. This is a rendering of a supposed train. And all these images, I was looking for revising a lot of what are the situation, this idea of changing the meanings of. You can see there the military are a very important part of the train. There are some of the institutions that are most benefited by this project, by the military in Mexico. Kind of scary, if you ask me, and no, I'm not the only one. So, yeah, so that is that project, which is actually a project that didn't really happen. And another project that I'm doing right now, I don't know how much time do I have. Much time. So this is the last project that I will show you. I guess it's a project that I'm making with my colleagues Sandra Rosenthal and Emilio Chapela, and we were making a project of the last, so-called the last living river in Mexico, which is the river Sumacinta, which goes from Guatemala to the Gulf of Mexico, and we were making a show that tries to apprehend some of the most interesting aspects of that river. We were initially going to stay in one area, but the organized crime has been growing a lot in Chiapas, so we had to move to the project so it could span the whole river because we couldn't remain in Frontera Corozal. There was too much trouble, so we had to move and had this sort of encyclopedic feel, which is kind of strange. But Sandra is very keen in the history. She knows a lot of the history of archaeological monuments. She has all this training as an anthropologist, and we are making the piece is called Estelas de Usumacinta, which is the steles of Usumacinta. Stelas are these archaeological objects which usually depict a Mayan ruler, and we are sort of like thinking about how these archaeological pieces travel through the river. Some of them are even inside the water, trying to know the history, how we discovered, etc. And also how this, for example, is in Frontera Corozal. We were really in love with this museum for the wrong reasons, but the thing is that this museum has two original stelas, but it was flooded. We found it, we went there to see the museum and it was flooded. And we were very interested in the idea of how the river reacted to this very particular space, which was very interesting. But the archaeological pieces were, left in a very precarious situation. So we made a project. We told them that we wanted to interact with the people of Frontera Corozal and document the museum, and we're still working on stuff with them to try to figure out what to do with this space. So, well, I guess that's all the time we have. If I'm not mistaken, we've been talking an hour about these things. So I thank you very much for paying attention to these projects. I hope you enjoy them. I hope that some of them made you think new things. And if you have any questions or comments, please do so. Thank you. Yes.
So, half an hour later.
No problem.
So, can you summarize the point of the destruction of the Anthropology Museum so that I can make my argument, my questions?
Yeah, sure. The destruction of the Museum of Anthropology is a thought experiment. In my opinion, the Anthropology Museum is one of the cornerstones, or the relationship of anthropology to Mexico is one of the cornerstones of national identity in Mexico. During the revolution, we had an anthropologist theorize about the use of anthropology in the country, because he said, we are a nation of many nations. He called it the little nations. So we need anthropology to know these little nations and integrate into one nationality. This was Gamio. Gamio said, we need to integrate that. And it is exactly the operation in the museum, is to sort of like, at the time when the museum was built, people were still punished for speaking their own language at school. So it is a very, let's say, disastrous process of archaeology, in which many times it happens that the drive to knowledge is also destroying what it tries to understand. And this happens to a lot of the communities, not only in Mexico, I would say, but let's speak only about Mexico. In Mexico, you have and still have these issues with communities in very far away places who are minding their own business, and someone wants to take their land, take their resources, and we have movements. And I think that the voice of the state is really embedded in a museum. It is, in fact, it could almost be said that it is a building that embodies the PRI, national, the party of the institutional revolution. It's a mindset. It's a mindset, an imaginary edifice for all of these cultures to somehow exist, and but for the good of what is destroying it. The same happens with the Maya train. Everything that is very important for the government has to be Mayan or Olmec or whatever. But it doesn't matter that many Mayan are actually against the train. And there was a study by the United Nations at the very beginning of the construction of this thing. And it said, yes, the people who are living in that area are going to be very well served by the train, except for the mine. So it is very, in a way, my work, I try to make sort of like a bridge that you can sort of enter the conversation through a little bit of an absurd thing. And people would go, well, these are not your pieces for you to destroy. Okay, just a thought experiment. No, it's just a thought experiment. Whose pieces are they then? Because in Mexico, they are the states. They are not for the descendants of the people who made it. This is a huge issue. In some other places, in some other parts of the world, these pieces would belong to the people. But in Mexico, they belong to the state. And the same happens with the territory, and most importantly, the resources. Maybe oil, gold, wood, whatever, it's always that matter. And I think this is a way to begin that conversation.
So can I follow up?
Yeah, sure.
So, well, as an archaeologist, I have to agree that disagree at the same time.
Yes.
I think that I've been in that museum.
Yeah.
And as a Latin American, I enjoy being in a museum that is very unique in the entire continent. And of course, it represents the politics of the time, the Olympic Games, all of that, the vision of Damian, perhaps Bonfield. But I think that the museums change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said that, some of these objects belong to the people. At some point, I would say, with archaeological evidence, that many of those objects were also oppressing people during their time. Tlaloc himself, or Huachique. So it's very complex, I would say.
Yeah.
So but it's interesting, and I appreciate that you are making an experiment to think about how we can improve, or how the museum can be improved. In Peru, we just had a disaster with the construction of a horrible museum that is not even in use right now. They have to spend $400 million, and the museum is now sunken, like water in the basement, and after 4 years, it's still empty because they put the money on the building, but not on the museum. And I think that in that regard, with all the limitations and with all the problems that you can see, and certainly the Mexican people have all the right to critique, I think that is still a very unique piece and an example for Latin American scholars and people in Mexico too. Also, and there are people that certainly don't like it, but there's certainly a large group of people that also feel proud about this building. So it's interesting that you are raising this conversation to at some point, improve it. But just to finish, what I also learned and found very interesting is that it's not only the Olmecs and the Mayas and the Mexicans, but the Zapotecs and the Chichimecas, and everyone is represented with archaeological artifacts. And what I found fascinating about the museum is that, well, I went there in 2009, but it's changed. But as you said, in the second floor, every single group that was represented on the first floor was somehow portrayed in the second, with exact geographic position. Mm-hmm. And I found that interesting. And of course, there is a number of things, 19th century looking elements that were used that possibly now, hopefully, they have changed with the humanities and all of that. But that was interesting as well, because culture, as you said, changed. And from the 60s to the 90s, of course, Mexico is not the same. Latin America is not the same. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the roles of museum, to preserve what happened at some point, in the storage facilities, and then the exhibits to be renewed. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that there is no historical accuracy and representation of what it was represented back in those times. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting anyways. Thank you for your presentation.
It's another question.
Oh no, I was just going to tell you very quickly. How did you never tell me about that museum that was built? on your books and everything?
Con punto elevado.
Ways of colonizing exercise. I had mentioned destruction. All of these archaeological materials and cultural goods were returned to with the resources to create their own way of honoring their history. And then what would you?
I don't know. I don't have an answer because I do not belong to said peoples. And some of them will agree for them to remain. I mean, this conversation has a long thing. I could show you some other things that I work with that continue this. But some of the things that are interesting is that many of these objects were not supposed to last for long. People are like, oh, this is from my culture, but that said culture would have destroyed it. For example, the Wirartari people, they make the objects and then they put them in caves. And if you want to have an example, you have to go to Berlin because they destroy it. It's not supposed to be kept. And there's actually a very interesting story with the Preuss collection in Berlin. It's a completely different relationship to culture. And the problem is not what the objects are. The problem is that we are stifling the possibilities of other cultures to thrive. The objects, to some of them, they don't. In fact, a lot of archaeology was found directly with the direct opposition of the peoples who were there. This happened, I think, in Palenque, where people, we don't go there. You can read the accounts of archaeologists going to the places and making a mess, actually, especially in many different ways. So these objects it's an exercise of violence, even if it's a wonderful thing, that Indiana Jones taking the stone and run. It's exciting, but it has had these consequences. I'm just pointing out like that, but I'm in a position to judge other people because, for example, Gamio made a really good project in Teotihuacan. The project included the people who were finding the things and included a whole economy to figure out the project that they're doing. So it's bad. I mean, I know it looks extreme, but it's just a beginning of the conversation.
And that's why my provocation, there's many ways of visiting destruction and transformation.
Yeah.
And the path that you chose is one that kind of really depends on modern forms of destruction and technologies that are used by states to preserve themselves. There'd be a lot of ways of reading that, but I was also just wondering if you thought a little bit about alternative ways of capturing destruction and transformation.
Yeah, I mean, you could use cinema, you could use community activities, and you could, I guess that there are tons of documentaries in Mexico who are doing this, very well. Tatiana Hueso or other people are making fantastic cinema. Tania Jimena has done some interesting movies too. There are projects of simple engagement. When I say simple, it's just like the most valuable kind of thing would be that capacity. But this is an argument that points to that mechanism or that activity, which we still are using. Like I said, it's not the museum now. The Tren Maya is becoming, they buried. They excavated all the things to make that train, the railroad, and they were finding archaeological pieces at the time. So they found, obviously there was a whole civilization there, and they found tons and tons of pieces of archaeological things. So they transformed the whole territory into some kind of museum. But the operation of this is ours by the state is still there. And there's no question. This is what I believe would be the most important thing. But, this is a long post-colonial discussion. And I really appreciate that you brought that up. It's not the whole possibilities that we can.
Really interesting project. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the reception of your work. You said that the Tren Maya you were not able to put it in any gallery in Mexico. What was the reception to the destruction of the Anthropology Museum? Because you are going against the hardcore Mexican nationalism and the idea of archaeology and the India and the importance of anthropology and archaeology.
Well, people in the gallery received a lot of complaints. So people would go, there's a staircase, and they would go up of the stairs and complain to the people in the office. No? And in La Jornada, when Mary McMaster's made reported about the show, the people were commenting on the internet comments were pretty violent, no? And on the other hand, some people really liked it. Some friends of mine who, live in a community or have some kind of descent of a specific community, they say, yeah, I think it's a good point. It doesn't mean that you are entitled to destroy these materials. It's just a thought experiment. And also when I read a little bit more after the fact, I found that it is in reality, for example, Yasnaya Aguilar, who is a very interesting writer and linguist, she has precisely made the distinction. What is definitive of being an indigenous is its opposition to the state. It's precisely that is the problem. So I found good reactions and reactions that are not so. In fact, James Sauls, who wrote one of the texts for the catalog, he wrote a whole text about why you shouldn't destroy the monuments. So he was basically against the destruction of monuments, because we eventually had this thing of people trying to topple Christopher Columbus statues and everything, and this is a whole thing, no? Whole thing that we have to see. But I don't want to be, destroying pieces by other cultures in reality. I want to rethink the museum or how or try to elicit or join a conversation, because I know this conversation is not inaugurating a conversation, but join a conversation, trying to figure out a good or a more comfortable capacity to share what these cultures meant and how we're going to do it. One of the things that had happened for me, like I said before, is that a lot of they all remodeled the museum after that. And some of the people who curate the museum, like Johannes Neura, he's a curator of one of the halls of the museum, and he has alluded to this piece. They know about the piece. And I guess it's interesting for me. I mean, for me, it's an honor that they even know about it. But I think it, made a little bit of a posted there a little bit of a dialogue. And I'm really proud that this happened. No? Because on top of that, all my learning was after I made the show, not before. It's like you just drop the thing and then you follow the thread, but it's not like you know a lot and then you do the project. It just doesn't happen again.
Apart from congratulations on a very thought-provoking project or projects in general that left us a little bit speechless. But I was thinking about that while you were thinking of how to technically destroy the museum, you were also discovering it. So that was very interesting to me, the different material, the materiality of it, what they used, why, what was inside of it, what would you do with those materials? So there is some discovery in the destruction that was maybe the construction of the different pieces. So can you talk a little about that?
Yes, if you ever come over to Mexico City while I'm there, give me a call and we'll visit that museum together. And I will show you all the meanings that the builders on a museum put into that thing, which are very interesting. I mean, every material is so well thought. I mean, I'm not saying Pedro Ramirez Vasquez is a perverse. Well, he's the official architect of the PRI, which was a perverse system. But he was a pretty genius, creative person too. You know, it was some of his ideas sound very sinister today, but it's in the same way as you see a monument of antiquity when you feel that it was built by people who were slaves, like all, but at the same time, like the way it was built. There's a sense of wonder in the museum in that respect. And there's a history for each little thing. He was one of these people who write about everything. He was thinking of every single detail. And it is pretty amazing that they were telling me that every Wednesday before he died, every Wednesday he went to the museum to check if everything was going well. And there are other histories. And so what I do when we go to the museum is I hire Mr. Daniel Adonegui, and he tells us about the actual pieces of archaeology, and then I speak about the demolition. So we have this sort of like strange didactic function, which is, I guess I never thought I would end up doing this kind of didactic piece, but I think it's an important part of the thing, you know, to, like you say, to make this analysis of the museum itself. For example, the museum takes after the Louvre Museum in France. They went there, three architects went there to Paris to see that museum. And they said, oh, we like that this museum does these things, we're gonna be better than the Louvre. So it was interesting that the museum as a revolutionary device was also contemplated by them. It is a revolutionary thing, and they try to somehow reenact architectonic motives with that. I don't know if I answered your question correctly, but yes.
Thanks for telling us a little bit about your work, a very explosive relationship to institutional critique, and you know, also made me think of a colleague about iconoclasm and how in some ways you're also, there's a creative element in this destructive ideals, right? I'm curious about you said you've been working for more than 10 years on this project, and I'm curious about how the political landscape in Mexico has changed quite significantly in the past 10 years. How has that affected, well, your relationship to the museum, but also how has that featured in the way in which the museum handles its relationship to national identity, to indigenous cultures? But I'm also curious about what you expect to see, you know, with Sheinbaum coming to power now. You know, it's a very interesting time, so especially in this project.
It is. There are like two ways I want to answer that. One is what actually people have done with some of these arguments, and I think that in Mexico there are tons of young people and not so young people too who have made fantastic projects of interaction, community interaction, and of movies. And like I said, a lot of people. There was something that the social networks, or how is it? Social media? No, social, like Facebook and how do you call it? Social media, yeah, sorry. They have created a consciousness that wasn't there as quickly, and they have made, you know, not many people got, well, many people, but not as many as we needed, people to understand the actual problems of Mexico, for example, its composition in terms of ethnicity. People sometimes do not know how many people or languages are spoken in Mexico. And so there has been a consciousness, a more evident consciousness of this situation. But at the same time, like you said, politically, it has gone completely into the manipulation. Or exactly what I'm criticizing is the using of this motive to make a government. This is what I am thinking that we should. And it is interesting that some artists and colleagues of mine, I'm not going to call names or anything, but they understood it the other way. That, oh, it's so cool to make pre-Hispanic art. Well, I don't like to exploit that iconography if you do not point to the actual problem, which is a political, social, historic problem. Just because it's nice, I understand it's nice, but I think so I think that I have been joined in the conversation by many people in the Americas, even elsewhere, because this is an important issue, I believe, worldwide. And in terms of the politics, Mexico is like trying to recover indigenous ideas, and there is a huge fetish with these things in this government. But at the same time, they don't go the way they should go. And this is not what I say. This is what many indigenous intellectuals say. They try to make a new law, but they don't actually give autonomy for other issues that are happening. So, with projects like the train and others that are around it, I wouldn't say that it's unanimous that the left and wing government is doing something good for cultural pluralism. I don't think there's this consensus, apart from what I think. It's a tough question. Yes.
I have a question from the live stream.
Yeah.
Which is a little more of a personal question.
Yes.
Irony was a common strategy in contemporary art up until the 90s, but it has become since then somehow problematic. How do you incorporate humor into your work, and how important is it for you?
Well, I don't know if you can. I mean, I understand that there are some trajectories in art making, but I'm not sure if you can grab irony and just like put it in baskets and just don't use it anymore. I understand that self-criticism is a capacity of all art, especially all modern art, not only postmodern art. And yeah, of course, I was an ironic artist in the 90s, no? So I guess I haven't been able to escape that. But one of the things that are probably true is that irony sometimes is not action. So I guess that it's not about irony or not irony. It depends what kind of ironic statement you're making. I guess that would be my answer. Is what kind of ironic position you're having? Because yeah, I mean, and there are people who criticize an attitude, but there is I think there is a sense for every artwork, and on top of that, it's very difficult that you criticize something from an artist that artist hasn't criticized of himself or herself. You know, it's something that somehow when you posit a work like this, you're not embracing a position. You're trying people to understand a field that you're proposing in order to post. So sometimes you have, I mean, my position regarding some of these topics has changed with time, has developed, and then changed back. The piece, because it's not propaganda, it's not a series of objectives. It's a field to study stuff. And if people find it useful or interesting or fun, it's a great thing. But it is not an agenda in itself. Because if I wanted to make some activism thing, this is not going to do what it takes. Activism is something much more serious that I'm actually pretty incapable of doing. For personal reasons, my capacity, my abilities, not those. This is art, and it has such kind of potency Yeah, well, I hope that's an answer for the person who's, I'm talking to you as if you were made the question. Okay. Thank you. Luego, okay, so, I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Carlos.
much.
Thank you.
It was
everyone.
fantastic. To celebrate the beer.
Yes.
I'm not supposed to. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.